I'm going to talk for an hour and a half. Screw you guys. I got the stopwatch. No, I will try to make this quick, but everybody who says that goes about 17 minutes. So let me get started. Right, so I kind of threw these things together in a fit of caffeine-fueled rage in about an hour. So it's SDN, NFV, and the hype cycle. I'm not talking about Gartner hype cycle, just sort of the craziness that's going on. And I alluded this to the mic earlier. I have a disclaimer to make. These are my opinions, they are not official party line. Part of the reason I have to make that is I have spent my entire career at Level 3 on SDN and NFV. I've been there for 6 months. So there's a lot that I don't know. There's a lot of decisions I haven't made. This is not necessarily what we want to do. It's what I think. So that's my disclaimer. So when I was asked to submit a proposal for a talk here, it was answer these 3 questions. What is SDN? Why are you excited about it? And how does the network of the future differ from today's? And I think that's in the blurb in your booklet. So my whole, again, caffeine-fueled rage answer is in there. And I'm going to try to touch on that a little bit here, but also keep to the goal of what do we need? What are we missing? Where are we? So what is SDN? And I talked about this at the mic, but I still want to reinforce this point. There's a spectrum, right? One end of the spectrum, it's open flow. And Brian talked about this, and we all know the history. This is where it came from, right? The other end of the spectrum is this thing I'll call shimmer, and I'll show you why in a second. And I think there's a sweet spot in the middle, which is this programmable networks. And I'm not going to hammer this point home, because I think we've all talked about this, and everybody's interpretation of it is different, but we all kind of get where this is going, right? This ties into what I need because, well, I'll show you that when we get to shimmer. Scope creep goes from left to right, and hype creep goes from left to right. It's pretty easy to understand what OpenFlow is and what it does. It's a lot harder to understand what programmable networks do and what they're for and what they don't do. And to the far right, it's even worse. So this is OpenFlow, right? And this, I cribbed this from the OpenFlow 133 spec. You have the ability to subtract all the Ethernet stuff, right? Because I run an IP routed network, and we all run IP routed networks. Yeah, we have a lot of metro stuff, but I don't run a campus backbone. Right, so subtract all the matching you can do on Ethernet fields. You really get source and destination IP address v4, v6, port numbers, protocol type, right? Standard stuff. You can match on it and you can do some stuff with it. What can you do? You can queue, you can remark, you can drop, you can punt to regular routing, you can pick an output interface, right? All kinds of good stuff. What you can't see very well, because it's kind of faded up there, this is policy routing, right? Route map foo, match IP address, match IP precedence, set interface. Routers have been able to do this for 20 years, right? So in a sense, it's not new, right? It's the ability to do something other than just straight up destination-based routing on your traffic. Ever seen Men in Black 2, right? New hotness, old and busted. So this is this to me is what OpenFlow is, right? It's policy routing. Now I don't want to denigrate it, right? It's wire rate, vendor-wide, ubiquitous, programmable, API-based policy routing, and that's pretty cool, right? What could I do, what could you do if you had really good policy routing at every edge point in your network? You could probably do some cool stuff, right? Now, is that worth 3 conferences a year? No, it's policy routing, right? So that's kind of one end of the spectrum. Is it sliced bread V2? No, it is not. Right? It's policy routing, but it's cool policy routing. The other end is this thing called shimmer. Right? So in 1976, Chevy Chase, Gilda Radner, Dan Aykroyd did an early Saturday Night Live skit called Shimmer. It was a non-dairy dessert topping and floor wax. And the whole skit goes into you can spray it on your food. If you spill it on the floor, that's okay. You can clean the floor. Right? It was everything in a can. I was at a conference a couple of months ago, and I saw a booth there, SDN for video. So Level 3 has been doing this for 15 years. Customer goes to a portal, says, I want a video stream of this size from here to here, clickety, clickety, pull down, and it goes and touches the devices. Do we now retroactively call that SDN? I don't know. I've seen transport SDN. What's that? That's open APIs to transport gear instead of proprietary stuff. That'd be cool, but you didn't have to call it SDN. Software-defined data center. I don't know what that is. A friend of mine is big into this in VMware, and he has to kind of throw open his mouth a little bit whenever he uses the term because he didn't really know what it is either. Software-defined application services, as opposed to hardware-defined, I don't know, right? Software-defined enterprise WAN. There's a lot out there that if you took the software and defined out of it, they'd still be pretty cool features, right? This often includes NFV, which it doesn't, which is what I'm going to argue here. We have a quote from Bob Metcalf, no one really knows what SDN is. Well, maybe Bob Metcalf doesn't know, but it's confusing. We've seen that here so far today. Everybody's got a different good definition. Now, take that and temper it. I was around for a lot of the early MPLS deployments. I was an MPLS guy at Cisco in 1999, and it was cool to see. And this feels like that same kind of hype and craziness thing, right? People wanted to do all kinds of stuff with MPLS, right? It was, sorry, I just got to get my stopwatch. There we go. I'd get calls from account teams. Come talk to my customer about MPLS. Okay, let's talk. What do you want to do? I want to do MPLS. Why? Because I don't have it. Right? And if the best business case you have for something is circular, you might want to go work on that before you start changing how your world works. But MPLS changed the world, right? And I think SDN and NFV and all this stuff has some potential to do that. We just need to find it. So one thing I'd ask for from the vendors and from the community of operators and everybody around it, tell me what this isn't good at, right? Because if you can't tell me what it doesn't do, I don't know what it does do. Tell me what the weak points are. Tell me where it breaks. Tell me why a central controller is bad, right? The line I used to use is the central controller thing is all well and good until Hal tells you he's not going to open the pod bay doors. And then you're really kind of boned, right? So tell me how we're going to get around that. Help me figure out where the pain points are. Then I'll understand what this is. The programmable network stuff, I'm going to skip because we've flogged it to death here. I do think there's some sweet spot in there. I like the stuff that Brian put up. It seems to be a nice marriage of let the vendor do what they're good at, the hardware, the ASICs, and the protocol stacks that have been beat to death and work really well, but add the tweaks and twists and turns when you want to. To me, SDN really is all about breaking things down into pieces, right? Connecting those pieces together and using those pieces to build new things and to rebuild what we have. And you see that in what Brian said, right? He threw in his own ISIS that was a little bit different. That's kind of a breakdown and rebuild thing. Again, policy routing for feature, whether it's service chaining, whether it's a security thing, whether it's some whatever else you want to do, that's kind of a breakdown and rebuild kind of thing. A lot of it, we get into discussions about separating control plane from forwarding plane, right? This is the OpenFlow switch diagram. You've got a controller. We've all seen this picture. That's the ODL stack, which you can't read from here, but we all know what it looks like. This is a picture of an old Cisco 7500 from a training slide that I used. And I wish Russ was here, because I think it was his slide originally. This was the first distributed router I ever worked on. You had a route processor and some line cards, and the route processor made the decision and told the line cards what to do with the packets. Okay? This is not new either, right? But it is a new application of the same way we've been doing things. New hotness, old and busted, right? I'm not saying everyone should roll 7500s out because they're done, but this is a reuse of existing tools and existing ways to look at things as much as anything else. Now, what's cool about this, right? First, you had an RP that talked to a controller, or sorry, rather, you had a route processor, right? And now the new paradigm calls it a controller. You had an IPC between the route processor and the line cards. Now we call that OpenFlow, or we call that NetConf, or we call that I2RS, or we call it whatever comes up next. We also have routers. And maybe in the SDN paradigm, we don't have routers anymore, we have line cards, right? Wouldn't it be cool if I could do, buy the route processor from Cisco and buy the line cards from somebody else, right? Who maybe the control plane isn't there, but they can do line rate 10 gig, 40 gig, 100 gig. Right? Because a lot of this stuff, outside of like the lasers and the deep WAN physics and stuff, is fairly commodity, but you've got a couple of vendors here that have really solid routing stacks. I don't want to go buy a white box BGP, but I'll buy Cisco's BGP and run it on a white box 10 gig switch. I don't think Cisco will sell it to me like that, but I'll buy it, right? So why am I excited about SDN? I'm not. I'm not against it. I think I'm somewhere in the cynic, pragmatist, realist, whatever you want to call it, camp. It's got some cool stuff. Some of it will happen, some of it will never happen, but I like the idea. What I am excited about, though, for me, and for what I've been tasked to do, is NFV. And I want to separate that from SDN, right? So to touch back on the actual theme, what do we need from SDN? I need help navigating the previous waters. Show me what's going to work, what's not going to work, why I want to do it, why I should move down that path, right? And every customer is different, every service provider is different, every vendor is different. This is kind of where I'm coming from. So going back to the theme question, right? How does the network of the future differ from today's networks? Network is programmable fabric, right? Yeah, well, we know that. Virtualizing what has been unvirtualizable, right? This this is interesting. And you can do it in part, you can do it like Brian talked about, you can do it in whole, where you can buy a white box, you can write your own controller, and you don't need anyone else to do your control plane for you, which was the original Stanford vision, which I'm never gonna do, right? Personal opinion, never gonna do. There is some value in separating the hardware and the software, but you gotta be careful. A lot of these paradigms are data center paradigms, but these routers aren't Hadoop clusters. If I virtualize a CPE, that's a single point of failure, right? Unless I get really, 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 really tricky and very skilled at it. And if you're not a really good data center provider, it's hard to build all those pieces. And is it worth it to me to do that sort of thing, right? We have data centers, but I don't have I'm not Google. I don't have 37 data centers that are a billion square feet and a guy on a bicycle with a basket of hard drives replacing Hadoop cluster things you can just throw away, right? CPE is different. Virtualized functions are different. So there's a downside to that, right? I'm not for it or against it. I'm excited about the potential, but you got to kind of approach it with some reality. There is some value in moving some CPE function to a data center. You get perhaps some economies of scale, perhaps easy relocation on failure. You get better life cycle management. If a customer buys a Cisco CPE and doesn't like it and you want a Juniper CPE instead, boom, done, right? I don't have to ship them a new box. So maybe there's some value in that. What do we need to get there? And I've kind of kicked at these a little bit before. This is an interesting question, right? Is the network a data center, or is the data center a network? Which one are you bringing to the other? And we talked about this morning with the skill set question, right? You need people who are really good at data center and really good at network and don't particularly have a bias one way or the other. Just because you're good at one doesn't mean you're good at both. I have to throw rocks at some of the data center protocols that were, well, let's just do MAC things everywhere. And we can do it with VLANs. Oh, we ran out of VLAN tags. Let's put another one on there. Let's put another layer. It's that Gillette razor with the 17 razor blades on it, because if 16 was good, 17's got to be better. I think there are better ways to do dynamic tunneling, encapsulation, segmentation. I'm a big fan of MPLS myself, but I'm a router guy, not a data center guy, so I don't know what they need to solve their problem. I know as it converges that you need people who can do both. I need a smooth handoff between the host and the network. Right? If I'm going to do service chaining and virtualization, do I stop it at the PE and do I do MPLS L2 VPNs to the PE and then bust it down into VXLAN at the PE? Do I do it at the TOR? Do I do it in the hypervisor? Do I do it in the VM? Why do I pick one? Why do I pick the other? Which one is best? Which one is least bad? Help me sort this out. Right? We're looking at vendors to do this. We stopped counting at a dozen different people who want to do this. All their slides look the same, but all their code is different. Help me sort through this. This is what I need so I can deploy something. I also need tools that do the hard parts, right? We're not an open stack shop. Yeah, we have people who are good at it, but as a company, from the network guy perspective, I don't want to have to think about what my Neutron and Nova extensions are and how I do this. Just give me something that works so that I can do what I'm good at, which is use the network to differentiate myself. And this goes to my last point. Give me enough tools, enough knobs, levers, and buttons so that I can do competitive, differentiatable things. Because the thing that scares me the most about a central controller, right, is if I buy the central controller and I don't write the apps myself, and I buy the routing app, and I buy this app, and I buy the customer-facing portal and stuff like that, it gets very homogeneous. And how do you build a competitive environment if everyone's got the same tools? Right? There are other differentiators, right? Footprint and size and blah, all this other stuff. But I worry about if everybody buys the same stack and all the stacks do the same thing, where does this leave us in terms of service delivery and uniqueness? Right? Because let's be honest, if there was only one radar in a network, 80% of this room wouldn't be here. Right? You'd build one thing, you'd do that one thing, and you'd be done. Nobody likes that, and it's not interesting, and it's not good for the consumer either. That is my pitch, and I have a minute left. I did want to hold questions to the end for the whole panel, so I will stop here, but we should have plenty of time for questions. Thank you very much.